Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of professional wrestling comes one of the most polarizing stars of all time, with $1 million physique, a passion for the industry, and a work ethic that led him to the top of WWE, even though he was met with violent hate nearly every step of the way. We're talking about John Cena. John Cena was born in West Newbury, Massachusetts on April 23, 1977. Cena excelled in sports at a young age, becoming an NCAA Division III center for the Springfield College football team. John later became a bodybuilder and began training to enter professional wrestling in Ultimate Pro Wrestling, a company based in California. In 2001, Cena signed a deal with Ohio Valley Wrestling, a promotion which was used as a developmental territory for World Wrestling Entertainment. Cena's WWE main roster debut came against Kurt Angle on the June 27, 2002 episode of SmackDown. Though John lost the match, it was the kickoff of what came to be known as the Ruthless Aggression era. Cena adopted a rap gimmick which saw him freestyle on the mic, and his rhymes began to pop the WWE crowds. He became so popular that his segments on the shows were some of the most anticipated moments on all of WWE programming. Cena's star continued to rise, and with his babyface turn in 2003 came a run that would see him become the top money-making talent in WWE. John was the face of the company, and every top angle, as well as every pay-per-view, was built primarily around him. Though he was not only the top guy but also the top protagonist, John's popularity eventually began to wane, as many WWE fans turned on him. Cena's clean-cut, unoffensive image was a far cry from the edgy gimmick that made him a star, and it wasn't long before he was booed in arenas all over the country. Longtime WWE fans wanted John to turn heel, and though there were opportunities for that to happen, the company did not give in. John remained a hero, and his booking as Super Cena caused him to become the most controversial figure in the company. John's reign at the top of WWE lasted for nearly 14 years, and during that time he faced almost every main event star in the business. He won multiple titles in WWE and is a 16-time world champion, a record shared only by Hall of Famer Ric Flair. John left WWE in 2017 for a career in Hollywood, where he has become an action star in movies and TV. Thanks to his charity work, his acting career, and his run in WWE, John Cena has built a resume that will stand the test of time. His supporters continue to talk about him, as do his critics, all of whom agree that he will never be forgotten. And that's the lowdown on John Cena. Professional wrestlers have made the journey from the squared circle to Tinseltown. It's happened a lot over the years. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's really bad. And we're going all the way back to Terry Funk, who I think at the time probably had the best transition from pro wrestling, the business as we call it, to the business of Hollywood making movies. He and Stallone got to be friendly, and I think Stallone requested him. I think Funk did some stunt work, and then he was actually on camera. And he had a nice little reputation going, and hopefully a stay a little paycheck going from his work in Hollywood. Roddy Piper did the same thing. We all know about Hulk Hogan's foray into the world of Hollywood and big budget movies and, well, small budget movies, whatever you want to say. Over the years, we've seen other guys come and go. We've seen some women come and go as well, trying their hand. You could make the case that Batista has had the most successful transition recently, but of course, all roads sort of end with The Rock. That guy went from being the Tooth Fairy and the Scorpion King and some other highly forgettable turns to becoming the highest paid actor in Hollywood and being in demand. The guy is an absolute beast. He's a phenomenon, kids. He totally is. And, good on him. He put the work in, learned his craft. Is he, Oscar worthy? Maybe not. I don't know if we're going to say he's Pacino level, okay? But is he good? Dude, he's rounded the corner. He's made the turn. I mean, he's a believable action star, not just a pro wrestler that's jacked up and tatted and he just can fire a gun too. No, he's come a long way. Someone else who's come a long way is John Cena. You can't see me, kids. You can't, no matter how hard you try. Five knuckle shuffle, five moves of doom. That John Cena. Multicolored t-shirts, camouflage as far as the eye can see, white rapper, homeboy gimmick. Yes, that John Cena. Some negative stuff about John over the years, some backstage politics coming out from certain sources along the way. Nothing that I would deem to be too controversial or too, nothing career ending, certainly. Um, Differences of opinion, different takes. Oh, he held me down, and he did this and he said that. Is there that much dirt on John that we know of? I don't think so. Is there dirt on John that we don't know of? Well, there's always a possibility that's the case. And for all we know, John is the scum of the earth. I'm not here to pass judgment. I don't think Phil is either. I like John. I've liked John for a really long time. And we're going to get into it here today. So I'm going to hit you with this, Phil, right out the gate, because I'm ready to talk about this because we talk about it in discussions and conversations, but I've never really covered John full force for a committed time frame unless it's on the main event. Tell me why John Cena, of all people, with that big, great smile on his face and movie star good looks, why is he such a polarizing figure in the pro wrestling business? Why do you think?
I think John was one of the last people from the time when WWE started making it clearer and clearer who was their handpicked guy. Um, I think once you dissect stuff from the Attitude Era, you can pick out who the handpicked guy was. But it wasn't as obvious as it was with John. And I feel like once fans could see that he was the handpicked guy, they rejected it.
Remember that night they called him up and he was on SmackDown from OVW and he did the was open challenge to Kurt Angle, and of course he lost. This was John during his Trunks days, didn't last too long, and he shook Taker's hand backstage and they made a big production of it, and I'm like, oh God, they're crowning this guy king already. I remember watching the show going, they think a lot of this John Cena kid evidently, and I mean, was that the problem, Phil? Because it was too much on the nose in the beginning from the jump?
Yeah, I think that was definitely heading into a time period where the WWE system made it very clear who they wanted their top star to be and who they prioritized.
I mean, he was in OVW, as we said, and Cornette was running the show, and he said from day one, wow, this guy's a star. Look at him. He's 100% committed to the gym, to his body, to taking care of himself, to looking good. But, underneath all that muscle, underneath that great smile is a guy who grew up watching Jim Crockett Promotions and loves old school wrestling, which he never gets enough credit for, which I've always defended him over, that he loves old school. And I remember the Dusty Rhodes a DVD that they did, that company did. And when they were talking to various wrestlers and they cut to him and they were talking about Dusty's time in that WWE with the polka dots. And John's like, yeah, that's not really Dusty. Like, that's not the Dusty Rhodes I grew up watching. And I didn't care for it. And I'm like, man, I've got another reason to like John Cena because he gets it, because John gets it. Does that come across for you personally, that hearing the guy talk and seeing the way he carries himself, like he completely understands the business inside out? Does it strike you as being the case?
Yeah, I definitely think that is a reason why he's had staying power. I think it would be very easy to try and say, oh, well, of course he succeeded because the machine was behind him. But I also think that, the machine has gotten behind a lot of guys and, it didn't work out for whatever reason or it wasn't consistent. One of the reasons that he has been consistently a top guy and managed to do what he has done outside the company is just because, how hard the guy works and just, how much he has a mind for the business.
Yeah, for sure. And, we've already talked about the fact that he was handpicked. I mean, you could very strongly make the case for Roman being handpicked as well, because he went from strong man of the Shield, and I wrote those words in a lot of columns over the years, the Shield strong man, to suddenly being, hey, I think this guy's going to be the next big thing. No pun intended. And so they tied their cart to him, and he, pulled him along. But no, I totally get it. Let me ask you this. Why was John Cena the right guy at the right time? Or was he the right guy at the right time, you think?
I can't remember who said it. I think it was Colt Cabana. Um, and yeah, I might be wrong, but Colt Cabana, I remember he was saying he was backstage at a show and he ran into The Rock, and he was saying the moment he saw him, he was like, I get it, why he's a star. Beyond any of the WWE stuff, beyond the catchphrases and all this other stuff, you take one look at this guy and you can tell why he's a star. He's got this big, you know, ridiculously muscular, athletic frame. He's got this big, smile that lights up a room, perfect teeth,
Right.
like he's just perfect. He's a specimen. And it's this kind of the same thing when you look at John Cena. Like I know it's said a lot, but when you look at a few of those guys out of OVW class, like if you're trying to make a wrestler, you're just trying to build them in a factory. John Cena is like, he's perfect. He's got the perfect build for it. He's got the perfect look. He makes perfect sense as a guy you would pick.
Him, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar in the same class, and Batista, right?
Yes, all of these guys look like top
Man,
stars.
that's. I mean, that's just mind blowing to me. Even after all these years later.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. Those guys were bound to go big places real soon because they all looked like
Yeah.
stars. Um, Now, I can get into how, I feel like they undervalue Shelton a lot, but that's not what we're talking about today.
No, and I agree. And I remember the two matches with Hunter on Raw. I think it was that really put Shelton on the map. I think, apart from the world's greatest tag team stuff, which really
Yeah.
was a feather in
Uh,
his cap. Those were fun matches.
yeah, I was a big fan of the world's greatest tag team run. Um, I still think that match with HBK is one of the best TV matches I've ever
Mm,
seen. Yeah.
excellent, excellent stuff. But yeah, John was God, as you said. If and it's the old, John Layfield line, right? If you could build a wrestler from the ground up, he would look exactly like Randy Orton. Well, I don't know. I think John has the old school pro wrestling physique, not old school in terms of 80s where you're barrel chested and hairy and whatnot, but I'm talking about Road Warrior vibe, Lex Luger vibe, where it's like this guy was born to be a wrestler. Look at him. I mean, like you said, he's a star. You can just tell. I mean, we did the Allen Iverson episode back in the catalog, kids. Feel free to go check it out. But we mentioned on that episode a Michael Jordan quote, which said, not from Jordan, but about Jordan, that if you didn't know anything about basketball and Michael Jordan walked into a room, you would say, well, that's got to be somebody I can tell. Because as Allen Iverson said, he had an aura around him, which other people said, yeah, there was definitely something about him. I think John has that too. If you didn't know anything about wrestling and didn't know anything about his stuff in Hollywood, but he walked into a room full of people, you say, well, that's got to be somebody. Do I know him from somewhere? I mean, he's got that look, he's got that personality. And man, Phil, if he's faking the kindness, he's good because you'll see him in the Make a Wish stuff. And there was that one bit where there was a kid talking about his mother or his mother had cancer, I believe it was. And they had John hidden behind the scenes watching and he's tearing up. And he seems like a very heartfelt guy. Now, that could be acting. I don't know. But man, it seems like he's maybe perhaps a down to earth, humble kind of guy. That's only helping his cause. Dude, why not now? Because people have warmed up to him because he's gone and people have gotten over it for the most part. Dude, why did people hate this guy with such a fury the way they did? It's a lot of factors, but what for you says this is why they hate him the most?
Um, I think there are a bunch of factors, but I think it's just the fact that he became such a big priority for the company, and it was just like at certain points during that run, it just became inevitable. You knew he was going to win. Yeah. All of the matches became very predictable and formulaic. Come down and run down people, and at some point he was never going to be proven wrong or get his comeuppance. I mean, when you look at that Nexus stuff, that's prime example of what people started to hate about him. It's just like, even at the worst of odds, he just still somehow comes out and wins.
Yeah, and the Nexus thing existed to get John over. I mean, people can debate that and say, "Oh, Tom, they were creating stars." No, they weren't. They weren't creating stars. They were getting John over as a top face. And if stars happen to be created, great. But I don't think that was the goal. It was to put John over by evidence of the fact that he beat all of them in the end.
Yes. Yes.
God, I mean, to me, I think that's obvious. You're right. I think those moments did change things and didn't. I think people gave him a chance in the beginning because everybody talks about, oh, Tom, when he first hit, he was the heel white boy rapper and people loved that. And he said controversial stuff and he was naughty. Oh, they loved it when he rhymed and he's such a good freestyler. And I'm like, yeah, but nothing changed really when he turned face, except he became the anointed one, the top guy. Then you turned on him. And it's not the same thing, Phil, but I had a conversation one time with a guy that hates the NBA, hates it, loves college ball, hates NBA. And I said, let me get this straight. The college player you're pulling for today, when he goes pro next year, you're done with him. He goes, yep. And I'm like, but it's the same guy. How do you stop supporting him just because he went pro? Like, it's not the same thing, but to me, it kind of feels that way. If you like him, you like him, regardless of personality. But man, people bailed on him. And we got to talk about this rapper gimmick, man. He's not bad freestyling, but is he rehearsed, do you think? Like over-rehearsed? Can he just do it off the cuff? Can he, at the drop of a hat, just start spitting rhymes? Or is he produced, do you think? Do you think he's good at this stuff?
Oh, it's definitely rehearsed. Boy, I'm going to be honest. During the Cena era, that is when I started to tune out on WWE. I did not like it. And for a long time, I resented John Cena. I did not like him. And it started with the rap gimmick. Once he came out and he became the white boy rapper, and he was considered the best because he had this rapping gimmick, and everybody was so astonished that he can come out and rap, and everybody just was blown away by the punchlines. And I'm just like, this is normal to me. Like, if you're a rap fan and you are out watching stuff like battle rap and stuff, you're like, okay, this is very basic. Like, this is a guy given a rap gimmick in wrestling, and he's given a chance to get it over. And I'll never forget at the time, I couldn't verbalize it at the time because I couldn't put my finger on what it was that was bothering me about it. I'll never forget watching those Ruthless Aggression documentaries, the docuseries. Have you seen it?
I don't know that I have.
So they had like a docuseries on the network where they would choose a subject every week from the Ruthless Aggression era. They had an episode about Brock. They had an episode about Cena. I think it's coming back for a second season where they're doing like Divas era and all this other stuff from the Ruthless Aggression era. But I watched the episode about Cena, and one of the things he said at the beginning is, yeah, I would go out there and try and dress as ludicrous as possible. And I don't know where I got it from. And I was just looking around like, you got it from black people.
Right.
and I was just like, this is what I've always resented about it, is that they allowed a white wrestler to ascend to the top of the card with a gimmick based off black culture, but they would never allow a black wrestler to do the same thing, ever. If you are a black wrestler and you're a rapper, you're a joke. Look at R-Truth.
True. Yeah. Wow. It scares them, doesn't it? Wouldn't that guy scare them?
I mean, listen, if they had a black wrestler get on their show and was rapping and proudly claiming to be a thugonomics and all of this, he's not a top star. He's not a top babyface. But a white wrestler is, and I've always resented that. And that's not to say that John Cena was not good at that character, and he didn't do great things in that role to get that over. But part of me could never get past that growing up. Um, and I didn't even really know how to verbalize it at the time, but I would just kind of look at it like, nah, I don't like this.
Right.
This is kind of whack to me.
Because we didn't believe that John really walked around wearing that stuff in everyday life, did we? Did we think that about him?
Of course not.
He shows up with his gear bag, and that stuff's in the gear bag. He didn't wear that stuff to the arena. Yeah.
He's coming out doing word life, word to your mother stuff, and it's like this Vanilla Ice. It's Vanilla Ice as a wrestler,
Yes.
and you could see all of the white fans that are just so into it. They're loving it. I'm just like, no, this is corny. Like,
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
And don't get me wrong, some of that stuff is great. Some of that stuff is funny. Like the first time he debuted on a Halloween episode, and he was doing the raps backstage. It was funny, and it turned into a gimmick that worked for him. But once you saw the more and more he was taken seriously, he's doing a rap album and all the other stuff, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's a no for me. But I will say, disliking John Cena a lot during that era is what made me a CM Punk fan. Because I thought CM Punk was the greatest because he was the guy that finally called him out on everything that I despised for all that time. And that's why when he comes out and he gives that line and he says, I don't hate you, John. I hate that you're considered the best. And I was like, yes.
That's good stuff. And another one of my favorite lines from that era was when Punk told him, "You have become what you hate the most. You are the New York Yankees." Like that.
Yes.
That did it. That because he was right. Okay, so I love that we segued already. May as well get into it. Apart from, well, WWE's not going to do it. John's their guy. Tell me why it would not have worked, or would have worked, whichever road you want to take. Punk becomes the top guy during the summer of Punk in that company when he, I think, before anybody else ever did it, outsold John Cena in merchandise. Outsold him, supposedly. That's what everyone says now. It's what Punk says, especially. That was the time. If you were ever going to turn John heel, if you were ever going to make a move, why would it have worked and why would it have not worked, you think?
I think there was room for it to work because it was something different. But I think that's precisely why they didn't want to do it, because it was something different. John is safe, and that's why John remained on top for them for so long. I mean, now I don't want to discredit how good John is. Again, like I said earlier, the guy works really hard. The guy gets it. So I don't want to, only say that it's because they chose him. But at the same time, he's safe. Like they're going to keep him at the top because for them, he's a safe pick. It's the same reason why they kept Orton at the top for so long, because Orton's a safe pick.
Right.
There's a bunch of guys like that. They're safe picks to keep at the top. You look at Punk, and Punk is Allen Iverson. He's different. He's not a big muscle guy. He's not a big body guy. He's a guy that's in good shape, but he's not in wrestler shape. He's a guy that's covered in tattoos. He's not going to come out and say what you want him to say. He's not going to be the guy that you put on the front of a cereal box and all the rest of this stuff. He's just his own guy. Now, can he go out and get his own endorsements and do other things? Sure. But he's not what you molded John Cena into.
Remember Bryan Danielson talking about Punk getting the belt. He said I was happy for him, but I was surprised because he's not what they want. He's not what they're looking for. And he's right.
Yes.
Punk's not what they're looking for.
The Iverson comparison is so great, and I'm sure some people sitting at home will be mad at that comparison. But when you listen to Iverson talk now, after he had his career, and he's like, yeah, I got in there and they gave me hell for dressing the way I wanted to dress. They gave me hell for all the tattoos and wearing an armband and all this other thing. You look at the sport now, and everybody is doing what I did. I took a beating for all of that stuff so other people can do it now. And you look at wrestling now, and you can see Punk's influence on that roster.
Absolutely.
You can see his influence on every roster, and what he brought to wrestling. But I think that's one of those long-term things where he'll be credited for that, long after he's done with wrestling. But in the short view, no, Punk's not the guy. It's John Cena, because John Cena is everything we've always wanted.
Right. According to them, right? So,
Yeah.
Punk is Batman to Superman's John Cena. Like, you've got Superman, like that page, that big splash page of Dark Knight Returns, where Clark is basically in riding boots and a white billowy shirt with his foot propped up on this big rock, and Clark and Bruce is like, look at him standing there, just him and the sun and the air around him, and I'm like, that's kind of John and Punk. Like, John being the great smile, the great body, he's Superman, and then Punk calling him out like, yeah, you're not all that. I can beat you. Like, I love that dynamic between those two. Is Punk his greatest rival besides Orton, or is he great? Is he John's greatest rival? Period.
I would say that their rivalry is probably one of my favorites. It's definitely what got me back into watching wrestling, because I wasn't watching for a long time. When Punk cut that promo, that's what effectively got me back into wrestling. And Money in the Bank 2011, I feel like that's one of the most important matches
Yes,
of
absolutely.
that era. Probably one of the most important wrestling matches ever.
I mean, it's classic. I mean, he wins the title, goes off through the crowd, blows the kiss next to that kid who became famous. Went home, threw the belt in the fridge and took a picture of it. It's all legendary now. Yeah, I'm with you. I get what you're saying about the John stuff, because for the better part of what felt to be like 5 years, I wrote about John and Randy Orton, because SmackDown was Randy's show and Raw was John's show. And that's how it was forever. And they were each champ, and it just rolled like that forever. And I'm like, God, this is never going to end. Like, this is legit. It's like the McMahon Helmsley era. I'm like, this is never going to end. We're going to die 10 years from now, and we're all dead, and they're still going to be doing this. Like, it just felt that way. It felt that way. John, I don't know. He proved he could do it. He proved he could carry it. He proved that, like you said, that he was the safe choice. He was the guy, just like Randy was. Does John get the amount of credit for carrying the company, or should he get credit because they propped him up, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there are some fans that absolutely love John Cena, and there are some people that, for that era, he was the biggest star, and he was the reason why they watch wrestling. But at the same time, there's a crowd that is just looks at him the way that I kind of said earlier, where I just was not into it. So I feel like he's going to be divisive, but at the end of the day, he's going to be appreciated for what he did for the era of wrestling. He carried that company for a long time, and it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to be the top guy or the face of a company. And so I think it's one of those things where once he's gone and he doesn't wrestle anymore, more people are going to appreciate him for that. And you kind of see it now when he comes back. Like when he came back at Money in the Bank.
Oh my God.
And you see that reaction he gets is because we've got some time away from him and get to appreciate everything that he did.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, while I'm sitting here and saying that a big part of, me enjoying wrestling again was CM Punk isn't CM Punk without John Cena. And I know that. I mean, at the time, I'm cheering CM Punk because I wanted to beat him. But, with, 10 or 12 years away from this thing and getting to look back on it now and understanding what John did for him, man, he is instrumental to CM Punk's career. He's instrumental to so many guys' careers. And when you look at, again, he did the Super Cena thing for a while. It was predictable that he would beat people, but he did put some guys over. He was very selfless.
Right. And you're segueing here for me again, because one of the first things people complain about was the gimmick. One of the second things people complain about all the time with John is his ring work. And the idea that, and I forget what match it was. I'm sure this was the only match. It's just the one that stood out to me, but it was a TV match. I want to say it was Cesaro, and I could be wrong about the opponent, but John took a beating for the majority of the match. He took a close to a finisher, I think it was. Dude, he popped back up. And I mean to tell you, he popped up so fast, and this is legit, brother. He popped back up so fast that in wrestling locker rooms I've been in, if he had popped up that fast, there would have been a conversation in the locker room after the match. It would have been, dude, you disrespected, you know what I'm saying? Like, you disrespected me. Why did you not sell anything for me? Dude, I've been in heated locker rooms where guys are screaming at each other like, you can't sell for me? I sell for you all the time. But dude, whatever match it was he worked, he popped back up so fast, had the biggest smile on his trademark smile, didn't sell the leg that was getting worked, walked just fine, hit the 5-knuckle, the finish, whatever they call it, the attitude adjustment, won the match, and never sold a thing. And I'm thinking, man, for one of the first times I can actually see now, like I didn't defend him, but I was like, he's the top guy, he's an easy target. But after that match, I was like, okay, I get it. Like that was painfully obvious to the point where I thought, was this about the guy he worked? Was this a statement like, yeah, I don't like you, I'm not going to sell? Dude, this kind of thing happened more than one time. But other people will say, and I heard, dude, people have said this to me. Well, Tom, John can really work, but they don't want him to do that. They want him to brawl. And I'm like, excuse me, you're John Cena. You can't call on the fly. Hey, let's you and me go out there tonight and do Flair and Steamboat. I don't care what they want. I'm running the show. Come on, man. Let me ask you, Phil. I'll put you on the spot here because I got to. The no selling stuff. Can he not work? What's your take on all this stuff about John?
I mean, as long as the guy has been wrestling, the guy can work. He can wrestle. I do think that a part of what bogged him down for a long time is working the WWE style, and you got to have a handful of moves. You gotta do the factory line style matches where everybody knows the beats. Everybody knows the beats and the simplified style of wrestling, so you know what to get up for and you know what to cheer for. The 5 moves of doom are there because they're recognizable. It's the call and response of wrestling. It's just done in a very simplified way. That's just how WWE does things. Now, can I sit and pick apart what's wrong with that? Sure, but at the other end of that argument, Cena was the master at it. He did it very well. I mean, when you look at Hogan's run, Hogan wasn't that great. Hogan was just great at doing the beats that got fans to cheer. Hey, cut my ear for a few minutes, do a big spot, Hulk up, leg drop, see you later. And it worked. It worked because it got fans excited every time he did it. Look at Ultimate Warrior, same thing. He had all of the spots that got you excited, but you knew the spots. It wasn't that many of them. And so I think part of it is that's just their house style. It works. That's what they're known for. I think if he was given a chance to work outside of WWE, you would see more stuff that he could do. But he didn't really need to do anything else because it fit their style. Now, no selling and stuff like that. I think that again, that was Super Cena at its worst, and that's what people started to hate about him. But on some levels, I don't think that was all his fault. Because some of the stuff, it's again, they put him in this. I don't want to say they put him in a spot to look bad or fail, but when you put this guy on such a high pedestal compared to the rest of your roster, it was inevitable.
Because he beat everyone. He literally beat everyone.
Yes. He beat everybody. It's the same with Roman to a degree right now. When I feel like it doesn't matter, Roman's always going to win, And even if Roman's doesn't win, he's eventually gonna win. Like that, just think of that era where him and Brock were having all those matches and Brock would beat him. And it's just like, all right, I know this is still a vehicle to eventually get Roman over. It's just not tonight. 3 pay-per-views from now, he's gonna beat Brock. It doesn't matter if he beats him 3 more times. Roman's eventually going to win and beat him. And I think that became the thing with Cena for a long time. It's like, no, Cena's gonna win, even if he takes a beating one night, or it's just Nexus, the prime example. Nexus gets one over on him, and they look strong against him. John's eventually going to win.
On paper, because I mentioned the Dusty thing with John. On paper, John is his generation's Dusty Rhodes to a certain degree because, as you said, he fights back. He always comes back. There's always the comeback. But to me, where it differs is that you could hurt Dusty. You could break his arm in a parking lot. You could take out his leg in a steel cage. You could put him in a cast for 3 months. I mean, you could cut him all to pieces. He'd bleed like a sieve. I mean, you could physically hurt him. John never seemed to get hurt. Like he was never limping. He never sold the week before. Jeff Hardy. I'm going to tell you right now, no one sells like Jeff Hardy. That's number one. Number two, Jeff sold a match 7 days after it happened. He would come down the ramp holding his back for a match that happened a week before. I mean, that's dedication and continuity, remembering where you are, remembering what you did last week or even last month sometimes. John never showed signs of wear and tear. That that didn't help his cause with fans at all, did it?
No, absolutely not. And I mean, to my point of how I feel like he was the master of working the WWE style, to his detriment, he became the face of everything people did not like about WWE. And that's what made him a perfect foil for CM Punk at his peak, because CM Punk was anti-establishment. Punk was the establishment. That's what made him the perfect foil for RVD in that ECW match, because ECW was grunge and everything that WWE was not, and Punk was the face of everything that they stood against.
Well, and there's a lot to dive into with John, obviously, but we talked about the gimmick. We talked about his work in the ring. The third biggest thing for me with this guy is the no heel turn stuff. And, Austin infamously wanted to turn heel, had to talk Vince into it. Vince begrudgingly said yes, wish he never had. I hated it. And I think, apart from the cute little cowboy hat, haha stuff with Angle, Austin hated it too. And he regrets doing it. Is there a world in which John decides himself, I don't care what anybody else thinks, I don't care what the boss says, he goes to Vince, he shuts the door and lays out a plan and says, this is what I want to do. I'm going to wear the black hat. I want you to let me do it. I've got an idea. Do you think that was, without asking John directly, because we're not doing that, was that ever a possibility, or was this thing shot down the moment someone suggested it? Oh no, we can't have that, pal. I mean, was there ever a chance to turn this guy heel?
I think there were chances they could have done it. I mean, really, him at his hottest point before he turned face, he was a heel. The Thugonomics thing, he was a heel character. And there were chances after that to make him heel. But the thing was, the fans had turned against him and rejected him at several points where he was a heel in storylines. Like, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Punk was the heel in that program, but for a lot of people, we were rooting for Punk. We were not rooting for Cena. Punk getting away with the title is not seen as the heel winning. No, it's seen as the happy ending for a lot of people. It's what people wanted to see. Cena was inadvertently the heel in that program. Um, when you look at the Rob Van Dam match, he's the heel in that match. He's he's getting booed.
Yes.
He throws his shirt out there, it gets thrown back. No, he's the heel in that match. When you look at the most recent Roman stuff, he's the heel in all those matches. Um, he may not be outright a heel, they may not be treating it as such, but the fans have decided that they're rooting against him.
But in Vince's mind, Punk was the heel that night in Chicago.
Yes, this is correct. Another good example of that is the Bray match in the Firefly Funhouse match. He's the heel in that match.
Right. Right.
But it might not be where he was designated to be the heel by the company, but the fans have decided that, watching the dynamic between these two. But yeah, I just think that they looked at it like, no, this guy is marketable. We've got a Make-A-Wish guy in this guy. We've got a consistent merch seller. We've got a guy that we can put in all of these great situations. He's a top money maker. Nowhere we're making this guy a heel, man. We don't want to lose any money, man. We're making way too much profit off this guy.
Yeah, that's why part of me believes that at some point, either a text message or a phone call or a face-to-face conversation was had where John was told, listen, man, there's no way. We can't do this. And you know that. And John's like, yeah, I'm all right with that. I mean, most guys will tell you that it's so much fun being heel. It's challenging. It's fun. You get to be as nasty as you want to be, and you can try new things. You can only try so many things as a baby face, because if one person boos you, you lost the crowd. But as a heel, you can get laughed at, and you can blame the crowd for them laughing at you. You can turn the tables on them anytime you want to. But John had to be perfect all the time. Even on his worst night, he had to find a way to be perfect and never let it show that the crowd was getting to him. And he embraced the booing like Kurt Angle did before him. And because his song became John Cena sucks, they sang along with it. And he was okay with it. And he smiled and he laughed and he would cut promos about how the crowd was on fire and he could hear them, and let him hear you at home. And they're all booing him. But like, do you think ever it got tiresome for him? Like, did he ever get back through the curtain and say, God, I'm exhausted? Dude, was it not exhausting for John to consistently keep that freaking smile on his face through all that?
I mean, there are stories that he pitched the heel turn. There's stories out there that he did, and it just got turned down. I forgot the exact pitch, but supposedly there's a pitch somewhere where he was going to turn heel. He was going to stop wearing the jorts and everything, and he was going to wear like a singlet, and he was going to have like a totally different gimmick.
Wow.
But it just never happened, because at that point, then if he's not coming out with the colorful shirt and the cap and everything, you're not selling merchandise. And boy, I got it. When he came back at Money in the Bank, he came back with that new green shirt. He had the cap on. I went to a Raw like a little while after that, and I saw it. I saw how many people had the entire gimmick. They had the entire shirt, the cap, the wristbands, everything. I saw so many people that night that had it, and that is just the power of how good he is as a draw, and how good he is at selling merch. And that's why they never wanted to turn him heel, because they saw what he could do. And I get it. I get it as a business decision.
I mean, and not for nothing, we've mentioned him already, but Bryan Danielson wears white T-shirts on AEW. Like, he's got his own T-shirts happening. You know that they're getting a bigger cut on Pro Wrestling Tees than the WWE guys are getting from their own freaking company. Yet a guy like John is a walking billboard for merch, and Danielson won't wear his own T-shirt on TV. Like, I'll always hand it to John for being smart when it comes to marketing. He knew, without maybe having to be told, hey, let's sell some stuff, because everything he wore, they sold. Like, oh my God. Didn't they sell the jorts at one time, I think, on WWE Shop?
Yeah, I think they did.
Man.
But yeah, I mean, that's a credit to John Cena being just that good. But and that's why I can't bash him that much, man. I mean, he's just good. He's just good. I mean, it is funny sometimes when you look at him. It does feel like Wayne's World when when they're talking about shilling
That's right.
and Gar. You turn to Garth and he's got the cap and everything on, and he's just like a walking billboard. It does feel like that sometimes. Like he comes out there and he's like, "Yeah, buy my merch," but it works. It works.
Like some people just do things just because they're going to get paid, and that's just really sad. That's great stuff. And he puts his hands behind his head, and he's got yeah, you're right. Yeah, like you said, it works. He sells merch. I mean, hey, listen, not for nothing. When my kid was younger, he had to have the John Cena shirt. I think I bought him 4 different John Cena shirts. That's the one he wanted. Anytime WB Shop had a buy one get one half off, I would, I would either get AJ or I got Nakamura or I got like a retro Flair tee or whoever else I got at the time, Undertaker. And I'm like, all right, son, they've got to buy one get one half off or buy one get one. What do you want? It's always John Cena. So I
Mm.
mean, he spoke to kids, that whole Superman gimmick that, keep getting back up, keep fighting back, never give up. Dude, that never give up stuff, people laughed it out of the building. But in this day and age, that's become sort of a mantra for a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. Never give up. Don't let anyone tell you can't do something. Don't let anybody hold you down. Like in the hands of anybody else, that's never laughed at. But because it's John and because there's so much baggage with John, it gets left out. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. What about his catchphrases and his slogans and the stuff that he still maintains to this day? I think it's pretty solid stuff.
Man, I used to think all of this stuff was hokey. It was all of the stuff that I started to not like about Hogan in his heyday. And I was never a Hogan fan to begin with.
Right.
And so a lot of that stuff he was doing as like the white meat baby face, I wasn't really into it because it was just too cookie cutter for me. But when it worked, it worked. And to his credit, you did see how much a lot of kids enjoyed him. When you look out in the crowd and you see how many kids are cheering him when he comes on and they have his whole shirt on, they have his whole outfit on. And when you see him get out in that crowd and throw his towel to somebody or, stop in front of, um, some disabled kid or, some Make-A-Wish kid and just the joy on a lot of these kids' faces when they see him, it's like, it's hard to be mad at that. Now, this is, of course, of me an adult watching it, but at the same time, when it was happening, I used to boo the heck out of Cena. But as an adult, just watching what he brings, again, it's just so hard to go, all right, this is the guy we got to turn heel. This guy that kids love this much. It's hard to say that. It's hard to be like, no, we gotta turn this guy into a bad guy.
And not to keep going back to Dusty here, but when they turned Dusty heel, and Dusty's days in the ring were over, but they turned him heel and made him NWO, it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, I get his ring career is like pretty much over at that point, but like Dusty in the place where he became a star, like dude, sometimes it makes me wonder that heel turn that everyone wanted to see so badly. What if the thing had been a complete train wreck?
Yeah, and I think that it could have turned into a disaster. I think it could have easily turned into a disaster. And I mean, really, there's so many things we don't get if he does turn heel. I mean, again, to go back to the Punk thing, we don't get that Punk feud if he turned heel.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there were times you could have done it before that. Um, yeah, but yeah, it could have ended up going really bad.
But all right, so let's flip the script and say it would have worked. Would they have just turned him face in a year's time anyway because he got so much over as a heel again? Isn't that what everybody was afraid of?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you could look at some of the Roman stuff for that example. I mean, yeah, a lot of the stuff with him as heel ended up working, but a lot of fans like Roman right now. And I mean, I think a lot of fans see that he is comfortable and he's able to do stuff that he wasn't able to do as a babyface. And I think you might have seen the same thing with Cena. Like when you see Cena come back now, and he is just allowed to just go out there and talk freely, he looks comfortable. And I think that's why sometimes when he comes back, it's just so enjoyable. Like when he was doing the program with Roman and he was cutting those promos, those seemed like off the cut promos. It didn't seem like he was coming out there and doing scripted stuff. It didn't seem like they were, telling him what to do. It felt like, hey, I'm happy to be here. This is what I'm doing. And it kind of felt the same way with the Fiend stuff. He was coming out saying what he felt. And man, you've got to give him a lot of credit for buying into the Firefly Funhouse stuff and actually doing something really great for Bray. I mean, I think that thing falls apart immediately if John Cena doesn't go in and, go into it with full conviction.
Had him with the NWO shirt and hat on and the music, and you're like, oh my God, what's this?
Yeah, and he bought into all of the kookiness of it, and he went out there and he did it. It
Yeah.
wasn't like it never looked like he was phoning it in. It looked like he was doing everything that Bray was doing and having a blast with it.
Bray to me felt like, and I got to hit you with the Hulk Hogan stuff too because we talked about him already here a lot. But um, the comparisons between Cena and Hogan, in my opinion, are not deserved to some degree, but they are to another degree because John was fed opponents, maybe not in the same way as Hogan was. Hogan was fed cookie cutter, strong guy opponents. This guy was a Russian. This guy was Saudi Arabian. This guy was evil. This guy was funny. But like it was very generic cookie cutter guys. But Hogan always went over. That was the 80s. That's how they rolled. But like John, the way of feeding John was maybe a little bit different. Do you think that the comparisons between Hogan and Cena are justified, or is it just doesn't hold up?
I do think that they're justified in some ways, but I think it doesn't hold up when you add context to it. Um, because I think when you look at stuff like the Nexus stuff in a vacuum, or you look at other stuff where he just beat this guy clean and steamrolled him, and they were never given comeuppance, or they never got a rematch or whatever, and even if they did get a rematch, they just got steamrolled again. Yeah, it looks bad in a vacuum, but when you look at the entirety of his career, he did put quite a few people over, and he put guys over more than Hogan did. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, man, when The Rock came back, he put The Rock over in his first match. Now, of course, he guys went back. We put The Rock over.
Right.
There's several situations. I mean, man, he put Brian over. Um, a big part of
He put Nakamura
why,
over as well.
yeah, a big part of Nakamura being taken seriously going into that Royal Rumble match is Cena putting him over twice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I mean, there's numerous times where um, he did do great things for other people's careers. I mean, was it perfect? Absolutely not. um, but I feel like he is a lot more giving than people give him credit for.
I always thought Edge was a good opponent for John because, much in the same way Punk was, Edge was a complete opposite of John physically and gimmick wise and attitude and whatnot. Seemed to be anyway. Um, Plus the idea that Edge is dangerous and edgy and unpredictable and spontaneous, and John is very programmed and very by the book and very robotic. And John's promos sometimes on the money, other times Oh man, it's I mean beyond rough to listen to and to watch. I mean, it just depended on what his frame of mind was that night, what points he had to get across. But one of the things in his promos that he always did was he always talked about, and especially if he was confronted in the ring, you know how many guys have stood there in your very position and told me that they were going to do this to me, and they're all gone, and I'm still here. And after a while, it became, God, I'm getting sick of hearing this, but he's kind of right. Like all these guys have come and gone, not for nothing. You know, they were come and gone because Vince said so. But it kind of became John is like the benchmark now. Like he's the one. Like everyone else comes and goes. They either go to another company or they disappear and they come back eventually, or they quit altogether or get fired or whatever. But dude, this idea that he is that they're all gone and I'm still here, and Rock was among that number as well. I mean, when you're on top for as long as John was, just that promo right there should have been enough to heal him out, but it never did. I mean, dude, what about the idea that he just was on top for so long in that company?
Yeah, I mean, I it's one of those things where I feel like it's to his detriment um, sometimes, but I also think that if anybody understands how difficult it is to carry that burden and do it well, it's him. And because he's done it for so long, I feel like he did it with a certain level of grace that is kind of underappreciated. Um, and I do think that when he's motivated and when he's comfortable, he's a very good talker, like a very great talker. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to, again, as much as I resented him at points of his career, it's hard for me to just go, oh well, he was a top guy and he was only their guy and he never did anything for anybody. Um, you have to give him so much credit for the level of legitimacy that he helped AJ Styles get with WWE fans.
Mm.
If they don't have that great rivalry, and that's probably one of the rivalries that, you know, Cena went out on a high note on, and it helped to cement AJ Styles. I don't know if AJ Styles is considered what he is. I don't know if he gets that second reign where he had the year long reign if he didn't have that first rivalry with Cena.
What was the line him and Anderson and Gallows always use? Beat John Cena. It became a punchline.
Now it's time to beat up John Cena. I loved it. I loved that feud. I loved them just coming out and AJ Styles pretending I don't know why they're beating him up. They're not with me at first, and then it was like, oh, they are, and then it's just like they just come out and jump him all the time. It was hilarious. He come out and take his armband and use it as his headband. That's great. But yeah, that rivalry is so good, man. The SummerSlam match is great. The Royal Rumble match is really, really good. And that's where sometimes I have to look back, like, you guys think this guy cannot wrestle now. Some of that is just AJ Styles is just amazing in ring.
Sure.
But some of that is John Cena is also very good. Like I don't think that match is as good if Cena is not a good dance partner.
Right. And that goes back to what I was saying before about, is he holding back because he's told to? They just want him to brawl, that kind of thing. One of the things that John Layfield started using in commentary was he started calling him Big Match John. And dude, it first was just kind of a thing that he said, but oh my God, was he right. During the most important matches, the big matches not the TV matches that John always got up and didn't sell anything, but the big pay-per-view style matches, man, I wish I could remember what match it was, but like, I felt the vibe in the room starting to change for him. Like, wow, that was really good. And then he started getting a rep for, man, John always steps up in big matches. You know how he does. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, he probably could always do this, but again, maybe they didn't want him to. You think there's credence to that?
I just think, it's just part of wrestling the WWE style. And I think also he got very complacent.
Mm,
And I mean, I could be wrong on that, but that's just how it's seen from afar. But I mean, again, you can't just say that the guy just completely cannot wrestle when you look at some of the guys that he's paired with, like some of his best matches, he's probably one of Kurt Angle's best rivals. And Kurt Angle is Kurt Angle. Like you can't say just anybody can hop in the ring with Kurt Angle.
Of course.
Again, it's hard to just say, all right, well, he's good because he had good matches with Kurt Angle. It is Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle had great matches with a lot of people. And the same thing, he's had great matches with Bryan. Bryan, again, he's Bryan. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But still, when you look at their rivalry and some of the matches they had, he put Bryan over. He put several guys over. He put Lesnar over. He put a lot of guys over that deserved it. He didn't always do it when he should have, no, but he also was selfless in some matches where he needed to be.
And I was talking about the brawling aspect. Forget for a second that we knew Stunning Steve Austin in World Class and in WCW. Forget that we knew him in Mid-South. Forget all of that. And let's say the only Austin that we knew was the guy that showed up and shaved his head and started stunning people and drinking beer. You maybe could make the case, well, all that guy does is punch and kick. He can't work. He can't wrestle. Because if you didn't know anything about him or you'd never seen him before, that might be the overall consensus. Now, we all knew how good Steve was before he got there. But I wonder sometimes, was John not only capable but good? But it's like, well, John, we're going to talk to you about this rapper thing. We think it could work, but you're going to have to not wrestle. Excuse me? You don't want me to wrestle? Nah, you don't do that anymore. Just punch and kick and do some, put your pinkies out, put your fists together. It's a white boy thing. They'll love it. And I'm like, yeah, but if he can work, let him work. That I'll never understand why this guy can work. Well, we don't need him to work. I don't get that, dude. I don't want to get too hung up on it. I feel like I am. But I don't know why that bothers me so much. I guess because for his own sake, he got booed so many times for maybe the wrong reasons when he maybe didn't have to get booed. Maybe that's what it is.
I mean, absolutely. They did put him in bad spots sometimes, and he was just doing the company edict. And, he had to take it on the chin because, he was the face of what the company wanted. And I do think that he came along at a time where work rate was not prioritized like it is now. In this era where work rate is king because of things like Ring of Honor and PWG, what AEW is doing, New Japan, all these other things, like that wasn't the thing now. When you look at what Rollins is doing and some of these guys now are doing, it's just a totally different product. And again, this is before NXT came and, took a lot of the influences from some of those promotions I just named, and it brought it to the WWE umbrella. It just was a totally different mindset. And I still think that the main roster, the matches are better than they have been in a long time, but I still think that the style is kind of homogenized. And Cena just came along at a time where, you didn't have to be a great worker to be a top guy. And again, you look at a lot of guys before him, like you mentioned, Austin. Austin wasn't this phenomenal worker. As much as I like Rock is good, but he's not a phenomenal worker like some of the guys from this era. Again, Hogan. I mean, you can go as far back as Bruno. Bruno is great, but when you compare him to like top work rate guys,
no,
not in that category.
No. If John comes along now, he's Braun Breaker essentially. He's great haircut, great smile, and hey, maybe we could do something with him. But he's 2 years away from the main roster, maybe not that long. But coming along when he came, they needed someone for top spots, and he made a lot of sense because of, number one, he had a great attitude. He had a great look. He was ready to do business, and they felt like they could do something with him. He had the right mix of everything, didn't he? I don't know, man. Yep. I don't want to get too hung up on the negative aspects here or anything. Let's talk about some positives here, though, because we kicked the show off talking about, transitioning from the business to Hollywood. He's doing it now. He's been doing it for several years, but man, is he really doing it now. As we record this, Peacemaker season 1 is happening. and it's been a fun ride so far. Dude, it is this exactly what he should be doing? Is this the style? Is this the flavor of performance that he should be doing? At least right now, does it fit him or does he fit it? I mean, what's the answer here? Is this guy meant for bigger things or does he just go one step at a time, kind of like The Rock did?
I think he can go one step at a time, and I think he can do bigger roles. I think what he's doing with Peacemaker right now is just such a testament to how good James Gunn is as a director. And I feel like he's gotten some of the best performances out of John that we've seen yet. I think he's gotten to get the best out of his comedic style. I think he's gotten to get him to emote and do things that we haven't really seen him do much of in other movies or other things he's been in. And so I feel like, coming out of this, he's probably going to get more roles. I feel like this is going to do for him what Guardians did for Batista.
Mm. Oh God, I'm on board with that. I agree. And again, John was John said this about himself in promos more than one time. He was the first guy there and the last one to leave. And other people have backed that up, said, "Oh yeah, he's 100% dedicated to this. He's committed to this business." And to see a guy like that work that hard to get where he wants to go after he's done, I mean, I think that's great. Good for him. It's funny because it's like he won. You know what I mean? Like, not like he wasn't winning as he got booed because he was getting paid like crazy. He was winning then too, but it always felt like he was under siege and under fire and under attack. But fast forward now, these years later, I mean, he won. He proved that you can do what he did, not have to turn heel. You can do it the way they want you to do it, but like you said, do it with a certain amount of style and grace and do it his way essentially. And it could work. It doesn't have to be, well, I got to go to the extreme of turning. I've got to change my look. I got to do this, got to do that. Like, even if he had pitched it and they didn't say yes to it, he wins, right? I mean, he wins the whole thing and then some.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's come out of this looking great. I think when you consider how long it took Rock to really get into his niche as an actor, because a lot of those first roles he was taking weren't great roles. A lot of those first few movies are not good movies. So I think the second act of his acting career is going to be a lot better than the first half.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's only going to look up from here. Um, we talked earlier about his best opponents. Who's his best opponent of all time, you think, if you had to name one guy? Is it Orton? I mean, that's the one they kept going back to a lot. So, is it Randy?
I kind of think it's Edge. I think that Edge is a perfect foil for him. I think they had good matches. I kind of think it's Edge. I now it's it's hard to say it's not Orton because they went back to it so many times, but I think that that's kind of what hurt it because you got diminishing returns after a while because it was just like, all right, well, we're doing Orton Cena again, cool, and it's fine. It's gonna be a good match. It'll be fine, but it's like, all right, after a while, it's like, I don't really need to see this match again.
Well, they never did anything different. They never put a new spin on it. It was either for a title or it wasn't for
Yeah.
a title. And it's like, I'm getting bored.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, after a while, it's like, okay, we've seen this enough.
Well, I've talked about his dad quite a bit here on the show, but I got to ask you about the Cody thing. Because as we record this, Cody's maybe heel, but he's not admitting to it and all that stuff. And people are comparing him to John. In my opinion, it's off base. I kind of get why they're doing it because people feel this incessant need to compare things. I do it a lot too. I get it. I guess we all do to a certain extent. Is the Cody comparison to Cena justified or is it off base?
I think it's off base. I think people got disillusioned with Cody for different reasons.
Hmm.
I think it was a very I think it was a very weird way to describe what was going on with Cody to just say, oh well, he's a top guy and people hated that he was a top guy, so they rejected him. Nah, that's not totally what happened there. There are other reasons why people rejected him.
Yeah, some of it's by his own hand.
Yeah, some of it, he just kind of lost what made him interesting in that first year with AEW. I think he kind of lost some of that fire behind his promos, and I think just being away from live crowds for a long period of time during COVID hurt him. It just was so many other things that went into why people started to not like him, and I don't think it was the exact same as what happened with Cena.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think he's. I just don't think it's the same thing. But again, people feel the need to compare all the time. So let me ask you this: we've talked about maybe who his greatest opponents are. Is there one feud that sticks out for you as being either the worst or the best, or maybe one of each? What do you think was the one that was like oh, they shouldn't have went there, this was lousy, and one that you're like, oh, this was perfect? Maybe my version of the perfect feud was with Punk in 2011. What was the worst one he had, you think? Was there one?
Worst Cena feud. Man, it's hard not to say Nexus, man.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Because it's just how much I feel like it hurt him, and that I feel like it beating them the way he did just did nothing for those guys. I don't think it did anything for him, and it just hurt his reputation for a long time after that. Yeah, it's hard not to say Nexus. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Oh, other than that, it's very hard not to say Nexus.
I mean, there's very few of those guys even still working. Like Justin Gabriel, who's no longer Justin Gabriel. Titus O'Neil, who's, whatever he is for WWE, he's doing as good of a job as he can, whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great ambassador for
Right.
them. I will say that. Yeah, off the top of my head, I feel like that was probably his worst, and there are probably other ones that I'm forgetting, but that one just sticks out because of how much it hurt him.
And it has so much
and
potential too.
Yeah, and just what it did to those guys afterwards too. Oof. I really didn't care for the Del Rio feud either.
Oh yeah, good call.
The Del Rio stuff wasn't good. I don't think the R-Truth stuff was good either. Him coming out doing the little Jimmy stuff, not very good either. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. The worst John Cena feud is the Laurinaitis stuff by far.
Oh yeah,
I completely forgot. And if in case you are forgetting at home, John Cena and Laurinaitis main evented Over the Limit instead of Daniel Bryan versus CM Punk.
Oh my God, I had forgotten that.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you can see why Punk had so many complaints here, kids. I mean, good Lord. That's terrible.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, again, I feel like it was easy to reject him when, even if he was not in a good feud, he was still seen as the biggest star in the company, so he was still the main event. Even when you had two guys that should be considered, top champions or, big stars, they're not presented as that because we got to present Cena as a star. We got to present him as a top guy, even when he's doing something as awful as feuding with Laurinaitis. Yeah, he had other feuds. I'm just as great of a moment as it was for Rusev coming in on the tank, losing to Cena also hurt him.
That was
bad. That feud wasn't good for him. But still, when I really think about it, the Laurinaitis feud is absolutely the worst.
And the whole thing with him against Laurinaitis, John's the top guy. He's the corporate top guy. We all know this. Punk called him out for it. He was 100% right. But every time he got to wage war with the McMahons, he did. Argued with, Laurinaitis or whoever, he did. And I'm like, yeah, but you're their guy. Like, it never made sense to me. I don't think that helped him either, that they put him in a position of being a rebel. And we're going to force this on you guys because we want you guys to see John for being a rebel. You're going to love him for it. We're not falling for it. He's your guy. We know that he's the guy you want. To me, I don't think that helped John either in the long run.
I definitely agree. They had this stretch where they were trying to put him against as many big men wrestlers as they
Yeah.
could, and those feuds weren't good either because he had a bunch of matches with Big Show that weren't great. Um, didn't he feud with Khali at one
Oh
point that
God,
also wasn't
yeah. Well,
great?
anybody feud with Kali.
They had this stretch where they just insisted putting him in there with like every giant they could find, and it just was not good.
Yeah, again, that goes back to the Hulk Hogan giant killer kind of thing comparison, which I get it. Yeah, God, this guy's so layered in terms of everything that he did and everything that he said and everything that went on around him. Um, is there a missed opportunity with John? Is there anything that sticks out to you besides maybe the stuff with Punk, like that was so glaringly obvious? I mean, fantasy book it. Should he have put the Nexus over? I mean, what is the thing that you're like, oh my God, why didn't they just have him do this?
Yeah, I think beating the Nexus was one of those big things. I think beating Wade Barrett when Wade was hot was also one
Hmm.
of their biggest mistakes. Um, I feel like Barrett was one of those guys where it seemed like he had everything that they claimed that they want. He had a great look. He was a good promo. Um, Man, he had a really good finisher. And for whatever reason, every time it seemed like they were right on the cusp of pushing him the way we wanted, they would just pull the rug right out from under him. And those times when Cena beat him, it just was like, dag, really.
Well, I got to hit you with this because there was mania that one year when John came back and they ran that video comparing him to Babe Ruth, and then they started calling him the Babe Ruth of WWE. Which, again, as you said earlier, in that world, he was portrayed as the best wrestler in the world, the best of. They start calling him the best of all time.
Oh
Remember
yeah,
that?
yes.
Like what?
Why?
You're gonna you're gonna ignore your own Hall of Fame roster and call this guy the best in the world, like best of all time?
Yeah.
What about that idea of he's the Babe Ruth of the company and he's I mean, is it just overkill at that point? Isn't that just a bit much?
It was very much overkill. I think again they did not put him in great positions. And actually, didn't they play the Babe Ruth stuff when he came out at WrestleMania and he brought the Thugonomics character back?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wasn't really a big fan of that. It just was overkill, like he said. It just never worked for me.
Yeah, God, too much. Too much. Yeah, I don't know, man. Just again, just that whole notion that he's this mythical icon now, years after the fact, that this all this work he put in, this reputation. And again, like you said, I don't think it's anything that he did necessarily. It's what they're dictating that they want his image to be and what they want him portrayed as and all this other stuff. I mean, it's crazy how far they've come with this guy. I mean, from being that dude that challenged Angle to all the way to this point of 16 time. He tied Rick. Now, if you ask Ric Flair, of course, these days, God knows what Rick's going to say. No disrespect. No disrespect. I'm just saying, I grew up an NWA kid, still am. So I don't mean anything by it, but we know Rick's been, yikes. But if you ask Rick, does he care if John breaks it? He probably doesn't care because he likes John. They're tight, supposedly. I mean, dude, does John Cena break Ric Flair's record, or do you think he has said, perhaps behind the scenes, I'm not breaking that. That's not for me to do.
I mean, I think he's done interviews at this point where he's saying he doesn't want to break the record.
Hmm.
I don't see him doing it. I mean, I don't think that Rick would have a problem with him breaking it. Um, I think if anybody in WWE makes the most sense to break it, it's John Cena. Uh, I don't know. I personally don't care either way with it with the
Mm-hmm.
record. Because I'm not sure what it does for John at this point. He's already achieved so much in his career.
Right.
I don't think that I don't think that it raises his profile in any way. And it's not like he's gonna come back and have this run if he does it. It's probably gonna be one of those things where he breaks the record. He, is still a part timer, and he kind of goes away after he does it. It's not gonna be one of those things where he stays and becomes a full time wrestler again.
I mean, yeah, you're right. And dude, if it's me answering the question, who breaks it? I think Charlotte breaks it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Uh,
I mean,
I don't
Randy's
know.
at 14, isn't he? Or 12?
I think Randy is at 14.
Yeah. Which that's always a possibility too, I guess, because he and Rick are tight. Yeah, I feel like we could do another hour on John. Honestly, I just think there's so much to talk about. I think we've hit on the basic points here, but um, what do you think his like? What do you think? All right. So if it's not the Babe Ruth stuff, and I think we both kind of agree it's not because that's beyond hokey. What is his legacy in that company? You think like real world legacy? What would you think it is?
Uh, I think when you look at um, what is the blueprint for like a top guy, or not even just what they were looking for, just what does it look like for a guy to hold the flag for as long as he did and do it as well as he did, do it with so much poise and take the good and bad with it. It's got to be John Cena, and people can say what they want about him, like him or hate him. For a lot of people, he's the roadmap. I mean, when you look at what Roman is doing, you can clearly see the influences from John.
Hmm. I mean, without John doing it before him, there's no pattern to follow, right?
No,
Is John the Hulk Hogan of his era for his generation, or is that also an unfair comparison?
I think that he is, because when you look at the kind of the golden era, and who was the biggest star of that era, who was the face of the company in that era, it was obviously Hogan. When you look at the Ruthless Aggression era, uh, it's Cena. When you look at the Attitude era, it's Austin. I think he is the top star of his era in the same way that I think Roman is the top star of his era.
Hmm. Right place, right time for John, you think?
Oh, for sure. I think he came along um, right when a lot of the last vestiges of the Attitude Era were going away. You still had certain guys like Edge. You still had an Undertaker around. Um, but I absolutely think that he came around at the right time. He was the next young pup there that could carry the company forward. And once he proved himself, and once he broke that glass ceiling, like it just made perfect sense to go with him.
Um, do we see another big match with John at some point? And if the answer is yes, who do you think it would be? Who do you think is big enough? Not necessarily for a payday, because honestly, I don't think John does it for a payday. And maybe I'm dead wrong. I don't think John does it for a payday. I think he does it because he's pitched a good idea and he likes it and he's wanting to do business. But if he comes back for a big match, who do you think it would be against?
I think he could definitely come back and have big matches. I think there's a world where you can book a retirement match when he's ready to be completely done with wrestling. And there's a few guys that you could do that with. I mean, they've pretty much gone to the well too many times with the Roman match at this point. I don't think anybody really wants to see a third Roman match.
Hmm.
And they basically told the story that they could tell with that. Um, but I think there are other guys, if you really want to do retirement matches with, that works. I mean, if Ron is everything they say that he is in 3 years or whenever, and you're ready to make Braun and cement him, you could do a retirement match with Braun Breaker. It makes plenty of sense. There are other guys you can do that with. But it's just a matter of, I don't think it's a matter of John wanting to put people over, because I mean, he's shown every time he comes back that he's willing to put guys over. It's just a willingness from the company to tell a good story around his retirement. And they've kind of fallen flat on that. I mean, when you look at that Kurt Angle retirement match, which was complete garbage.
Yes, absolutely.
Complete and utter garbage. They can do something very interesting with his final match. And I hope that they do that.
It would be nice to give him a proper send-off, but I mean, if you're John, do you need that at this point? Do you need a proper send-off, or do you think it's just a matter of where his head's at any given time?
I think that wrestling has been so good to John Cena that if John got a situation where he could walk away from wrestling and then at the same time give somebody a big rub or do something to give back to wrestling, he would do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. John, I've always considered to be an old school wrestler in a new school body and new school way of thinking and way of doing business, but he's very old school in his head. I mean, I think he looks at the business the way they did in the 80s and maybe even before, in the 70s even. And I think that's how he thinks about wrestling, which I love that about him. I always have. You can just kind of tell a mile away that's where his head's at. I'd be interested to see what they would do with him if the time came that he wanted to have one more match. We'll wait and see how it goes. Well, again, I think we could do even more time on this guy because I think there's so much to talk about, specific matches, specific feuds, and whatnot. So who knows, kids? Maybe one day he'll come back and do something massive, and we'll have to cover him again at some point. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, Phil, take this thing home and give me your last word on John Cena.
Man, probably going to go down as one of the most polarizing wrestlers we've seen in WWE history. But at the same time, you can't understate his importance to the company. Just again, how long he held the banner for the company, just how instrumental to a lot of guys' careers that he was. You just cannot understate, what he has done for wrestling. I may not have always been the biggest John Cena fan, but I can appreciate that.
We covered the Black Album here on the 6M, and not to make too lofty of a comparison here, kids, but Jay talked a lot about missing him when he's gone and not respecting him while he's here, but you'll respect him after the fact. I think maybe that's where John Cena is at this point, that maybe people didn't respect him when he was there and in his prime, but now that they've had time to reflect, Phil, as you've had and as other people have had, they can look back and say, well, man, God, he really did work hard. Like, if nothing else, the time put in, the time served at the top, and all the things go. You don't just have to wrestle in that company, kids. You got to do the press tours, you're appearing on late night talk shows, you're cutting an album, for God's sake. All that stuff sounds, oh, Tom, that's entertainment. It's fun. I'll bet this guy didn't sleep for the better part of 15 years. I bet there wasn't time to sleep. Like, he just had so much going on. So, again, I love that he's hitting now. I love that the Peacemaker stuff is working, and I hope it gets better for him and bigger for him too. But I'm with you. I think this will do for him what Guardians did for Batista. And if we're handing out things based on work alone, then yeah, he's earned this. He's put his time in. He deserves to get his flowers now. And I think I'm okay with that. In terms of the wrestling stuff, time will tell. It is all very subjective, folks, as you know. What you like, the guy next to you may hate, and so on. So John's lasting legacy, I suppose, is whatever people say it is. And that may always be in dispute, because after all, it is him. But in the meantime, at least for now, that is John Cena. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.